It's been a minute since I dropped a video, and I figured the best video to come back to YouTube with is my thoughts on the iPhone 15 Pro Max. I did upgrade to the iPhone 15 Pro Max from the iPhone 14 Plus. Now, the 14 Plus was a pretty cool phone. I like the form factor, I like the size, but if you have seen Flossie Carter's videos, then you would know it's probably a bad investment. I should have saved up my money and utilized maybe eBay or any other places like SwapUp for an iPhone 13 Pro Max and maybe gotten a better deal out of it, because I ain't gonna hold you, I felt a little left out with the 14 Plus. You didn't have the dynamic island, you didn't have the high refresh rate of the screen, you didn't have the brightness of the Pro Maxes, you didn't have the extra camera to go with it, you just didn't really have a lot of the cool features that came with it, and it was not the best investment, especially since it was still a pretty expensive phone for what they were offering, and you can find better deals with other companies like Google and Samsung, cheaper phones with better stuff to offer, and I just didn't really get that. And I'm not gonna hold you, owning the iPhone 11 Pro Max, owning the iPhone XR or 10R, owning the iPhone 13, the 14 Plus really wasn't my best experience with a smartphone. And I don't think that's necessarily the 14 Plus's fault. iOS 16 had a lot of bugs. I remember my widgets weren't working, random crashes, things would just, it was just weird. And it was like that almost the entire year that I had it. It was like over and over, just constant bugs, and no matter what update came out, it never really fixed anything. I still remember, like, right before I got this, the weather bug was still happening, where the weather app was just not there, then it was there, then the widget would disappear, and then you would click it and then the widget would come back, but the data wouldn't load. It was extremely weird, and that, like, just certain things were just never fixed. iOS 17 has its bugs, but not to the point to iOS 16, at least in my experience. I know it varies on different devices with different iterations of it, but mine was fine. This is fine. I've had a very usable phone. The widgets have been cool, no crashes. At least that's how I've been rocking it, man. And overall, jumping up from the 14 Plus to the 15 Pro Max has been an incredible experience, not just because of the screen and the cameras, but I think just because of the software, man. It has made my phone usable and it's made it fun again. And just with a month plus of use, this has been probably one of my favorite phones to have and to own and to just play around with. I can probably do the whole fancy specs of the camera on the side here, but honestly, I'm just gonna list them off here. I have them in my notes. It's a lot. It's kind of a mouthful, so I'll just run this down pretty quickly. You have the 48 megapixel main with an f.178 aperture. You have the 12 megapixel ultra wide with the f2.2 aperture. You have a 12 megapixel 2x telephoto, also f1.78 aperture, and then you have the 12 megapixel 5x telephoto, which is new, and that is a phenomenal inclusion, I might add. 5 times optical zoom in, etc., and then you can digital zoom up to 25. Now, obviously, if you're a smartphone extraordinaire historian, then you probably know there's other phones out there that can take better pictures in this, or at least can utilize what they have hardware wise and software wise a little bit better than this. Software wise is probably a little bit more debatable just due to how Apple's ecosystem is and their processing. I know Google offers extremely good processing software wise when it comes to photos, but the iPhone still, I think, delivers very good point and shoot pictures. Yeah, you can find phones that have the 100 times zoom and other features that make the most out of those cameras, but I feel like if you're just out and about and you don't want to think about it and you just want to, take a quick shot of something, this is probably one of the better options. I do think the Pixel and the Samsung are like neck and neck. I know Oppo's done some pretty cool stuff as well. Nonetheless, I do think that the iPhone is probably what I think most casual people are going to jump for when it comes to this. And I know it sounds like this is pretty much said every year by different tech reviewers and content creators, and it's a little boring, but I do think in this instance for the 15 Pro Max specifically, it does work a little bit better, especially with the 5x optical zoom in, because you can get some really cool photos. And I'm gonna drop it here in a second where you can see all the different photos I've taken both in RAW utilizing the 48 megapixels and also the new 24 megapixel, because before the normal was 12 megapixels. Now they upped it to 24. I believe the iPhone 15 also carries that as well. That ain't just a pro inclusion. So yeah, man, the phone has been fun to shoot with. It's been awesome. I've actually find myself getting some better shots, at least when there's a lot of daylight, compared to my Sony ZV-1, which only offers, I believe, 20 megapixels, I think. And obviously in low light, the Sony camera does a little bit better with the fixed lens with the f2.0 aperture, but this still offers some pretty cool stuff, especially when you're out in real broad daylight. And the portrait feature has been pretty cool as well, to utilize the portraits even after you've taken the pictures in the Photos app. I thought that was a pretty cool thing to include. But anyways, I'm rambling. Let me go ahead and show you what pictures I've gotten off the iPhone 15 Pro Max. You know, the only real issue I had with this phone was something wrong with the microphone and the audio on the device. As far as the overheating, I didn't really have that much of an issue with that. I know a lot of people were saying that the phone was even hot to touch and they couldn't even grab it when it was charging or when it was installing a bunch of apps. I never had that issue. I think it got hot, I think like once when I was trying to take some photos when I was installing a lot of apps, and that's not really the smartest thing to do when your phone is literally in setup mode. I was just too impatient. Now I am gonna drop a video so you guys can see what I mean by the audio not working, if that makes any sense. Alongside that buzzing sound that you just heard, I was also constantly told by my girlfriend and my family that they couldn't hear me. I sounded very far away. And at one point when I was just in my room, they said it sounded like wind was just blowing against the microphone. And this was also around the time when I started taking videos and you would hear that buzzing sound. I went to AT&T, they couldn't fix it, and I had just missed the 14-day mark to return the device and get another one or make an exchange. I then went to Apple because it is under the manufacturer warranty, the 1 year, and they also really couldn't do anything except for a hard reset, and that I guess if worst comes to worst, I can always turn this phone in, but it hasn't happened yet, thankfully. So we'll see what happens in the future, but that's really the only real issue I had with this phone. I recorded this video out of order and my camera did fall, so I had to change it up because there's no way I was going to be able to match the exact angle that I had before, and it would have irritated me a lot in editing, so I apologize for that. As I said in the intro, I've had this phone for over a month now, and it's probably been one of the best experiences I've had with the phone. Both the quality of the speakers, listening to music, watching all sorts of video content, whether it's Netflix or YouTube or anything of that sort. The high refresh rate, man, it was so cool to get back to that because a lot of my older Android phones that I owned, like the Pixel 4 XL, had higher refresh rate screens, and going to the iPhone 11 Pro Max and then the 13 and then the 14 Plus, I just didn't get that there. So having it on this has been really fun, really cool to use, and making just any sort of media consumption just awesome. in every way, not to mention the cameras. That's also been a high selling point for this phone, and is what actually sold me to get this versus the regular 15 Plus, because unlike the 14 Plus and the 14, the 15 and the 15 Plus are actually pretty good deals, both price wise and what they bring to the table. They're better deals, way better deals than the 14 and 14 Plus from last year, at least in my personal opinion, because you are getting the dynamic island, you are getting the a better camera setup as well, and overall just I think nicer colors and at a relatively better price in my personal opinion, at least for what you're getting when it comes to features that are available on that device.